What is your biggest fear when it comes to the writing life? I asked you all that question, and I asked it of my email newsletter subscribers at masterwritermindset.com. I was excited to get back several answers from you describing the fears that are bugging you right now about your writing life. So I'm going to do something different today where I'm just going to address these questions one by one and give you some of my thoughts on each of these fears of things that might help you to have the courage to get past them. One more thing, I'm going to do a giveaway today because I so appreciate those of you who are willing to share your biggest fears that I've randomly chosen a winner to receive something free from me that I'm going to be sharing here as we go through. Okay, so we're going to start off with the first question that I have here on my list, which was from Devin here on YouTube. And Devin says, my biggest fear, the toxic guy I'm financially stuck with, finding out I'm writing about him in metaphor. I read this and got a little afraid myself for this writer. Certainly don't want to have your writing project put you in any danger whatsoever. I do understand in wanting to write about this experience. Writing can be very therapeutic in many ways. But if you're thinking of turning this into a story, you do want to be careful because you could get into trouble as far as slander laws and all that sort of thing. I'm not a lawyer by any means, so if you're really concerned, I would suggest you talk to a lawyer just to make sure that everything is covered. But the best thing you can do is just to change this character in your story as much as you can, and perhaps even change the setting or change the circumstances. You can take the essence of the story that you have. Maybe you've already written this or you're in the process of writing it. When you finish writing it, maybe take a look at it and say, is this person going to recognize themselves in my story? I don't know the laws, so there might be certain liberties that you can take with writing a story about someone you know. The main thing I'm thinking is I don't want you to have your story be something negative in your life. We want our stories and our books, especially if we publish them, to be all positive as much as possible. So you don't want to create something that's going to make you nervous or make you concerned that there's going to be some fallout somewhere that would be harmful to you, either emotionally or otherwise. So I would say to then change the circumstances enough so that this person would not have any leg to stand on if they were to come around and say, hey, this is about me. Well, actually, no, this person is completely different because of X, Y, Z, and because it's a completely different setting, it's a completely type of story. If you can completely change the genre even, that might be something that would be fun to do and would also help protect you a little bit more. Because I'm not a lawyer, I can't really address this specifically, but I would just say from a writing point of view, don't do anything that's going to put yourself in danger. Do write about this experience. Let writing be that therapeutic thing that it so magically is. But then maybe take a second look at it and see maybe if you could adjust the situation a little bit more to protect yourself. And if you feel the need, do get some legal advice. Okay, thank you, Devin. Our next question answer person was Robin. And Robin says, the biggest fear they have is that my manuscript won't be picked up by a publisher, small press. Okay, so this is a legitimate fear. This is one that I had early on too, because one of my big goals was to get a traditional publishing contract. I think many of us as writers want that validation of a traditional publishing contract. So I totally get that. I would say to approach this from two different angles. The first is to do everything you possibly can to increase your chances of having your story accepted by a publisher. And so that means writing the best story you can. And I would highly suggest that you get an editor, professional editor, or a professional book coach to go over your story before you start submitting it. Keep in mind that publishers have higher standards than they ever have before, but they've always had high standards. So you want to, for sure, make this story the best that you possibly can make it. And then once you've done that, I would suggest that you make submitting to publishers a part of your weekly priorities. This is one big mistake I made early on. I got the editors, I got the book coaches, I got the book the best I could possibly make it, but then I would send it out to one publisher, and if I got a rejection, I would stop and not submit anymore for another 6 months to a year. Okay, don't do that. Don't make my mistake. When you are finally ready to submit, then you want to kind of turn that into part of your writing task that you address every week. So the first thing you need to do is research small publishers. Look at their guidelines on their websites. What are they looking for? What are they asking for? Create like a Word document or an Excel document or something where you start keeping track of all these publishers. Then you want to get really good at writing a query letter. That is the letter you send to the publishers. There's a ton of information online about how to do that and how to do it well. Next, you want to get really good at writing your synopsis, which is the 1 or 2 pages or whatever the writing guidelines ask for. They're all different. Some will ask for 1 page, some will let you go 2 pages, but you want to create a really good synopsis of your story, and that is a challenging thing to do. For most writers, writing the synopsis is harder than writing the actual story, but there is a lot of value in getting good at it. This is part of being an author. So creating a synopsis of your story is going to help you in the future because it's from that synopsis that you're going to pull things like the back cover copy. It's going to help you talk about the story more clearly. So there's a lot of benefits to learning how to write a synopsis, but you are going to need that for submitting to traditional publishers. Finally, you really want to polish up that first couple of pages. Make sure it just really grabs the reader. I would suggest sending that out to other readers that enjoy your genre of book and see if it catches them right away, because that's what the editor is going to be looking at. Usually when you submit a story, you're submitting the query letter, the synopsis, and perhaps the first 3 chapters. So you really want to make sure those shine when you send those out. Then you want to create a system. So you perhaps send out to 5 publishers and you wait a month. And then you send out to another 5 publishers and you wait a month. Keep in mind, traditional publishers take a lot of time. If you are looking at a traditional publisher that says they're not going to get back to you for a year, I would suggest not even submitting to them. I mean, that's a year of your life, when we don't have that many years really when we're looking at it as far as our author careers are concerned. So you don't want to wait too long. You want to have publishers that respect your time and are willing to give you an answer, month, 2 months at the most. Go on to the next one and have a system where you're recording whether you've heard back from them or not, what you heard back from them, and then you go on and submit to the next 5. Each time you get ready to resubmit, you can polish your query letter, polish your first couple of pages, polish up your synopsis, because every time we take a step away from our story and we come back to it again, typically we see a lot of the things that we didn't see before, and we can make it even better. So allow that time in between submitting to 5 publishers or so at a time to give you the space you need to then come back and potentially improve that story. All right, so that's all. Doing what you can to increase your odds of getting selected by a publisher. Don't let rejections discourage you. Go back and reevaluate what you're sending out and then try again. If you get to where you've got 100 publishers that have said no, okay, so that's the next step. That is part B of my answer here. Do everything you can to get this accepted by a traditional publisher, because if that's what you really want, then you absolutely should go for it. If it doesn't happen, and that won't necessarily be because the story isn't good enough, it could just be that it's in a particular genre that isn't hot right now, so publishers don't want it as much. They're looking for something else. It could be that it fits in a certain niche that none of the publishers you submitted to address. There could be a lot of reasons why eventually this may not happen. So I would caution you to go all out in trying to get a traditionally publishing contract, but to understand that it may not happen and not to allow that to stop you from creating the author career that you perhaps want to create. If you want to be an author, you don't have to wait for permission anymore from somebody else. In fact, we never have had to wait for that. But today, more than ever, the options for authors to self-publish or to publish their own way are more accessible than they ever have been in the past. And at the end of the day, you are in charge of your author career. A publisher isn't. So yes, it can be a great thing. I absolutely encourage you to do it. But I would also suggest to you that you make peace with the fact that there is a possibility that it won't be picked up by a traditional publisher, and not to let that stop you, not to let that mean that you don't publish the book or that you don't become a published author. There are several options for what you can do if plan A doesn't come through for you. I would caution you not to waste too many years going after plan A. If you finish this book, it's as good as you can make it, and you start submitting it, my biggest recommendation would be to start on the next book. We don't realize how far we can go in our author lives until we're looking back on them. With every book you write, you're going to become a better author. So start on that next book, please, because what that's going to do for you is many things. Number one, it's going to turn your attention to a new project so that whatever happens with book number one is not going to be so huge in your life if you already have book number two underway. Then you can also perhaps, if book number one doesn't come through, you can self-publish that book and then try again with book number two with a traditional publisher, because clearly you're going to be a better writer by then. So in other words, my biggest advice for you here to address this fear is to, number one, make peace with it. It's possible that this book will not be picked up by a traditional publisher. That does not mean you don't have an author career. You absolutely can. So go for it, but make peace with plan B, and don't let this be the only book that you're putting all your efforts into. Moving on. I have a question from Kokoro Flow. This is the username on YouTube. Biggest fear: that I'll continue to slack off and waste another year with my writing project. Haven't finished it in 5 years. Okay, so I'm excited about this fear because this fear is absolutely within your control. Whereas having a book published by a traditional publisher is only like 50% in your control. Whether you finish your book is 100% in your control. And man, does it ever feel good when you do. I mean, I think any author will tell you that writing the end on that book is one of the best feelings in the world. I would say just a couple of quick tips: create a schedule and stick to it. I imagine you're already doing that. And when you fall off of that schedule, I think this is where we tend to get caught. We set up a writing schedule, and then when we fall off of that, we feel guilty. And so it takes us way too long to create a new schedule again and get going again. I would say to expect you're going to fall off whatever schedule you have going right now. Expect that things are going to happen and your writing progress is going to slow down or even stall, so that when that happens, you forgive yourself, you wipe the slate clean, you come back and you look at your schedule again, you say, okay, where can I fit in my writing now? So be prepared for when this schedule stops working for you, and then just restart, okay? Don't let that slow you down. The final thing I would say is reward yourself for every milestone. When you've completed, a chapter, there should be a reward. When you've completed a part of the book, the first part of the book, there should be a bigger reward. We have to realize how very important this is. As authors, we are lonely puppies out here. We're just doing this all by ourselves. There's nobody to say, hey, good job, you finished your chapter this week, or way to go, you got 2 chapters done this month like you planned. Okay, there's nobody to do that, and that can be discouraging because the brain needs that acknowledgement. We need that dopamine hit of, hey, good job. You can do that for yourself. I have learned this. As long as we continue to encourage ourselves along the way and reward ourselves with real rewards, a day off to do nothing but slough around, a little time in nature, music that you enjoy, a movie night out with someone you care about. I mean, there's so many ways that we can reward ourselves that we need to work these into our schedule, because that then teaches the brain, oh, this feels good, I want to do more of this. If you just expect yourself to slog all the way through this book, you're probably going to disappoint yourself, and then you're going to feel bad about yourself, and I don't want that for you. So make sure you're setting up regular rewards and you're rechecking in with yourself. When the schedule falls off, you come back and you reset it up, and away you go again. And if all of that fails, reach out for help. There are many book coaches out there that'll help you stay on track. You could go into a writing group that would help you stay on track, either in person or online. There's many options there. This is all within your control. So that's my big message here. You can make sure that this fear is unwarranted in your life and actually finish this story this time. So that is my hope for you, that you will push through on that and get whatever help you need to make it happen. Next question comes from Luana. Okay, so thank you all of you guys for sending these in. Luana says, I wouldn't say it scares me, but my discomfort is lack of sales and or lack of reviews. I enjoy writing, and the specter of judgment no longer sits on my shoulder. So I don't really care what anyone thinks of my stories, except when it comes to sales. And that tends to suck enjoyment and excitement from the process. Okay, so Luana here, I think, is expressing a fear that many of us writers have, that we will put all this time and effort into this book and then put it out there and it won't sell. And Luana says, on one side of the coin, I don't really care what anyone thinks of my stories. But on the other side, Luana wants their stories to sell, right? And I think all of us kind of feel that way. We're writing for ourselves, maybe. We're not necessarily writing to market. But then we also want that story to take off and be appreciated by other people. That's a totally normal way to feel, because I think initially when we write to express ourselves. But then, of course, we want readers to enjoy that book, because The writing process is like a full circle. We write, we put it out there, we get feedback. And without this part of the circle in there, something seems like it's missing. If we don't get that feedback from readers, then it's kind of like we're just hanging out there and we're not really sure what we're doing anymore. I've experienced this myself with different books along the way. If a book goes out there and doesn't sell as well, it's kind of like, well, what did I do it for, right? We start questioning that a little bit. Even if we believed in the story and we enjoyed writing the story, putting it out there, the other side of that equation, we want that feedback. We want to feel like it was worthwhile to others as well, and not just ourselves. Here's where we have to kind of sit down with ourselves and have a little chat. And I've done this with myself as well, especially the farther I've gone in my career. I've done this a little bit more and a little bit more. Initially, I just wrote to please myself as well. And I was thrilled when people read the story and connected with it and enjoyed it. But then the more I go along, the more I've experienced books that do sell well, the more I like that experience and I want to do more of that. I think what we have to be honest with ourselves about is making our priorities for one, and then understanding exactly what we want from this writing career. We can sometimes fool ourselves with what we think we want. We say to ourselves, I really don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just going to write this story. And I totally understand that because I've felt that in the past. But then we can also feel what seems to be the opposite of that. That if this book comes out and doesn't sell well, I'm going to feel bad. So we have to get really clear about what we want. We have to say, do I really not care what anybody thinks? Because if I really don't care what anybody thinks, then I'm not going to care if the book sells. I'm going to put it out there and, if it doesn't sell, then who cares? I didn't care what anybody thought. And I understand the difference there as far as what Luana is saying. When I'm writing it and I'm creating the best story I can create, I'm not letting what other people might think of it into my mind. And that can be a really good thing. But on the other side of the coin, if you're saying, I care about sales, that kind of throws a wrench in the works. Because if we do want this story to sell, then we do kind of have to think about what people might think. Because we can't expect to write a story that is only written for us and then expect huge numbers of sales for that story. What this kind of comes down to practically is genre and what readers want to read. If you want good sales, you end up approaching your writing a little differently than if you just want to write what you want to write and you don't really care. And I would say you have to choose to a certain extent. Good writing is typically going to be recognized one way or the other. But if you want sales, that's a different thing. I mean, I have looked up award-winning books, many, many, many of them. I have sat and listened to authors talking about their award-winning books. They were fabulous books, but they sold maybe 3,000 copies. One gentleman I listened to, and I can't remember his name at the moment because this is many years ago, but he was saying he's getting award after award after award, but then there's only 3,000 copies sold. So his life doesn't really change. He does get the validation, and there is value in that, but his life doesn't really change. So I think in a way, we have to decide. And I don't mean that you sell out if you're interested in your books selling. If you want sales, it doesn't mean you have to sell out. That means you just have to target the reader and what the reader wants. And then you work your unique kind of creativity into that, if that makes sense. So if you're writing fiction, one of the big genres of fiction right now that's really popular is mystery. You could say to yourself, okay, can I fit my creativity into the mystery genre? Because then when you put that out and it's mystery, you are targeting those readers. You have a much better chance of making higher sales with that book, okay? Nonfiction is another place that you can do that. You can really target your reader. What are they really looking for? What problem are they looking to solve? You target that reader specifically, you're going to have a lot better chance of experiencing higher sales. So I think I'm kind of rambling here a little bit, and I apologize for that because this is just off the cuff answering these questions. I hope this helps, Luana. My main thing here is to just understand that if you are writing simply for yourself, that is totally a valid choice, that the book may not sell as well as you would like it to, especially if it isn't easily slid into a certain type of a genre. You can still have a very good book there, and you can get validation on that book. And I'm not saying that it won't sell, because sometimes that magical combination does work. It's just not very often. But sometimes you can create the book of your heart, and you don't care what people think, and you put it out there, and it does sell well. That can happen. But what I'm saying is that if you're interested in sales specifically, that you do want to think about that when you're writing your book, if that makes sense. So I would say don't expect the world to hand you both. Don't expect because you have written this book and you didn't care what anybody thought, but then you put it out there and it doesn't sell so well that you're disappointed. That is not a personal failing. And that does not mean the book wasn't good. It just means that the market is difficult. And finding your readers is difficult. So creating a book that is going to be more what readers are actually looking for is going to give you an increased chance of sales. One more quick thing on this. If you want sales, make sure you're doing everything you can to get sales. And that means having the best possible cover, the best possible blurb, the best possible launch plan, that you have as many reviews as you can get, that you get yourself out there, that you let people know about the book. The biggest obstacle between the book and sales is people simply knowing about it. That's one of the biggest things we authors have to deal with. So that's where we talk about author platform and all that. We have to get ourselves out there so that people even know about this book. So that's another piece of the puzzle, is that we have to find a way to help people to even know this book exists. And that's all wrapped up in platform, which we can talk about another time. Moving on, I have a question here from Yasmin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Biggest fear about the writing life? That I won't make enough money to pay the bills with my writing. That's the single biggest worry holding me back, financial distress. Okay, so a couple things here. The first thing that I will tell you, that almost any experienced author will tell you, is there are a lot easier ways to make money than writing books. Books are not huge money-making machines. They just aren't. On the whole, there is not a big margin when you sell a book. You're not earning a bunch of money off each book. If you are traditionally published, you're earning pennies usually, or maybe $1 or $2. If you're self-published, then you're earning maybe, $3, $4, $5, $6, depending on the form of the book and the price of the book. So thinking that writing and publishing books is going to make you a lot of money is not a promising future for you. I would say if you're writing books to make money, do something else. Maybe you create courses, or you teach people one-on-one, or you're a coach or something like that. That has a better promise of earning you some money than your little book is going to earn. On the other side of that, if you are looking at this long term and you are looking at writing many, many books, okay, you're looking at being prolific and having a lot of books out there. If you invest the next 10, 15, 20 years into doing that, and you develop a big backlist of books, and you get yourself out there and you build a strong author platform, then eventually you do have the potential of making money. Eventually that may work out for you very well. Number 3 thing I would say on this, if you're writing to make money, make sure that you have that as your top priority when you're actually creating the book. So if you're writing nonfiction, you want to really have a particular type of reader you're targeting, and you're solving a particular problem for them, and then write the next book. Get that book out there, write the next book. If you are writing fiction, you want to write in a genre that is likely to make you money, and that is the genres that are selling high right now. Write stories that readers out there are wanting to consume, that gives them at least some of what they expect out of the book, so they will come back and buy your next one, and your next one, and your next one. I'm wondering if perhaps you might be thinking that having the book will help you in a professional capacity to make more money. Now that can be a good way to go about it. If you are someone who is coaching people already, or you're already setting up a situation where you're going to be working with individuals, having a nonfiction book that supports that can absolutely help you to create some authority in your niche. So if you think of it that way, that the book is supportive to your overall business, then that is a really good approach to how you can then go on and make money in your own business. If you are a freelancer, then absolutely, you can make money that way while you work on your book. If companies are paying you to freelance write, then you can make money that way. And it could be that you were saying that, if I misunderstood your question, I apologize. It could be because I'm looking at it again and it says that I won't make enough money to pay the bills with my writing. Writing, period, absolutely can earn you money. I mean, I've been a freelance writer for over 25 years. So that is definitely possible. You can be a ghostwriter. You can write for companies. You can write on different platforms and make money that way. Just understand that a book isn't going to do it for you, but you absolutely can diversify the types of writing you're doing and who you're doing it for to earn money. If you have more questions on that, feel free to ask those. I can tackle those in another video. Okay, thank you, Yasmin. Moving on. Question from Sharon. Okay, Sharon says, what scares me right now about my writing life is never finishing my 2-book series. It's a juggle, yes, and I enjoy it, but it seems like such a big goal for sure, as I'm not even halfway through one of my stories. or one of my series, sorry. With so many hats the author has to wear in this writing biz, it can be a little overwhelming. Boy, that is no doubt. So Sharon, thank you for sending that in, is scared about never finishing my 2-book series. So I'm assuming that means she's got 2 series going here. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But that seems like what she's saying, and saying that I'm not even halfway through one of those series. So I'm wondering where the other series has been started or not. Okay. Number 1, absolutely, this is a huge goal. I mean, I would get overwhelmed thinking about that myself. And number 2, you absolutely can do it. I think whenever we let fear get a hold of us, it's because we're looking too far down the road, right? I mean, we're thinking, oh, I have all this to do, and it can feel very overwhelming in that moment. The way that we ease our anxiety is just by shortening the viewpoint. We look for the next month. What do we have to get completed in the next month? And that's all we worry about. We don't worry about the rest. Okay, so just try to shorten your viewpoint when that anxiety starts tackling you. And I think that'll help you relax a little bit more. I mean, we all know in the author business is step by step by step, right? Brick by brick. You're building it up brick by brick. If you really want to finish both of these series, you absolutely can do that. It's completely within your control. Just a matter of shortening that vision and planning the next 30 days out. And then when that 30 days is over, then you reevaluate and say, okay, now where do I need to go now? All right, that being said, I would caution everybody who's listening to this to be wary of series. Okay, so for a while there, everybody was saying that in order to make money as a writer, you have to write in series. But there's a caution with that because it is assumed that the first book in your series sells well. The first book in your series sells well, then you have buy-through for people buying the rest of the series. But there's a whole other side to that not many people talk about. And that is, what if the first book doesn't sell well? You put this wonderful first book out there and then you're working on book 2 and book 3 and however many more books. What if those early books don't sell? Okay, then you're stuck. You're stuck in this series that perhaps isn't feeding back to you. We always have to be careful in our writing lives that what we're doing, we're at least getting something out of it, that it is feeding back to us so that we're not ending up just feeling depleted. If we have a series that's kind of dead on arrival, we're still going to feel like we have to finish that series. For the readers who did enjoy the early books, we don't want to let them down. That happens too often. I was at a craft fair once and selling my books, and I had a reader tell me that she was afraid to buy the first 2 books in my series, my Midas series, because she was afraid that I wouldn't finish the 3rd. So I had to promise her, I promise I'm already working on book 3. It will be finished. Okay, so you have to be careful. Series isn't always the way to go, is all I'm saying. If you haven't yet started something, be careful. Especially if you're a new writer, I would suggest writing a standalone to start with, because we need to learn how to write. We got to put a few books out there before we really get our wings underneath us. So I would suggest not doing a series initially until you get going. If you already have started a series, then I would say don't make it a 7, 8, 9, 10 book series unless it's really selling well for you. If you put some out there and it's selling well, then by all means, do whatever you need to do to continue that and make your readers happy and just pull in the money and everybody's happy. But if you haven't gotten that far yet, I would just caution you to be careful with series because they can get overwhelming. They can get really burdensome. So if you're in this world and you're on book 3 or 4 or 5 or how far you're going, you can start to slow down and it can start to all feel really heavy because the farther you go in the series, the more you have to keep track of. When we do that and we start getting into places that are just more difficult as a writer, as long as we're getting good feedback from readers and as long as we're getting sales, then absolutely we're going to have that motivation coming back at us that's going to help us to deal with this heavier load that writing a series can be. But if we're not getting that and the book isn't selling, then it can just all get really super, super heavy. Now, I'm not saying that Sharon's books aren't selling. I'm sure they probably are and everything is great. And she's just dealing with, the overwhelm of what a series can be. But I'm just using her question to caution everybody just to be careful with series. Don't think that that's the only way to go. Oftentimes, writing a standalone book is your best step because then you're done with that book and then you can see how it sells. If the sales warrant a book 2, then you can go ahead and do that if you want, but you're not stuck and you're not in this place that can start to feel burdensome. If you are in the middle of a series and it is selling well and you do want to finish it out and it's just feeling overwhelming, then take the other tactic and try not to look too far down the road. Create your smaller goals along the way to help you finish this. And if you find that your motivation is waning for this book, I've talked to some writers who are traditionally published and they have a contract for a 3-book series, for instance. And by book 3, they're just starting to go, you know what? I don't care as much about these people anymore. That can happen even when you're under a contract, a traditional publishing contract, and you have to finish this thing. If that happens for you, a couple of things. Number one, I would suggest that you try to return to playing on the page. When you actually sit down to write, don't think about, your deadlines and your contract and all that. If you can, try to flush that, put it aside, and enjoy playing with your story. I would also suggest perhaps starting on something else on the side, another project that you can go back and forth with. It doesn't have to be a whole nother novel. It could be another short story. It could be another series of poems. It could be a children's book. It could be a nonfiction book. The possibilities are endless. The goal there is simply to give you something else that can help you feel motivated again and help get that creative spark going again. Because I've often found when I have 2 projects, and I usually do have at least 2 projects going at a time, one is fiction, one is nonfiction, that the 2 feed off of each other. You can have a really good day on the fiction that then feeds into the nonfiction and vice versa. So having another project that's small, that seems easy, that seems fun, can sometimes give you the energy and the motivation you need to then be able to complete your series. So just a couple suggestions there. I hope those are helpful. If there's more questions, feel free to let me know and follow up. You can add a comment to this video or simply send me an email in response to one of my newsletters. Thank you, Sharon. Moving on to Livia. Livia says, hi, Colleen. Thanks for your brilliant newsletter, books, and videos. They are very helpful. Well, thank you, Livia. Appreciate that. You asked what we are most scared about when it comes to writing. My fear is that my story will be boring and will not make ideal readers think or feel anything. That is my definition of failure as a writer. I don't need the book to be perfect. I need it to be meaningful and impactful to the intended readers. Okay, that is really a cool question. I think it's cool that Livia is already thinking of her reader. That is something I think we do as we go. I mean, initially we tend to write the book just for us, and there's still a lot of that in there no matter where you are in your author career. But you have come a little ways when you start thinking about your reader. And you start thinking, you know what? I want this to be something that someone else will get something out of. That is really good, Livia. They're already thinking about that. The fear that the story will be boring, let's hit that first. So the way that you stop a story from boring your reader is to make sure it's not boring you. And it's kind of cool because it works this way. If you finish the story, set it aside for a month, and then come back and start reading it. When you go back and read your own book, you're going to be reading it like a reader instead of a writer. So you're going to see the places that maybe are boring. And you're going to see the places perhaps where the impact isn't what you wanted it to be. Especially as we come to the end of the climax, we want that to be impactful, right? You're going to see where that's not happening. So that's the first thing, is that you are going to find it as a reader as long as you give yourself some space after you finish it to come back and read it. Second thing I would say is that this is why we hire editors. This is why we ask beta readers to read our book, because they can see where the story pacing slows down, or perhaps where the impact isn't where it should be. Remember, you don't have to go this writing life alone. And I would highly suggest that you don't, that you get outside help to help you with the story once you've finished it. Now, I'm assuming that you're finishing this story. That is the biggest, I probably should have said that first. The biggest first step is to finish the story. Don't let your fears about what the story isn't going to be stop you from finishing it. Because once you finish the story, you've got something you can work with. And understand that every writer has to work with the story once it's finished. Okay, it's not like we write the story and it's perfect and we publish it. That rarely, if ever, happens. Instead, we write the story. And I can promise you that pretty much every author, myself included, has places in the book that are boring, has places in the book that are not as impactful as they could be if we told them a little bit differently. So finish the story. One more thing I would say is to make sure you're studying story structure as you're writing this story. Okay, that's one thing I didn't do early on that I wish I had done more of. In other words, how you're plotting it out, what you're revealing and when. That's going to keep your reader interested. That's going to keep them turning pages. It's going to help you build up a fast pace. And I would also highly suggest that you focus on your antagonist in the story. Make sure that the antagonist is getting at least as much attention as your hero. Okay, because that's what ratchets up the tension and the stakes, and that's what makes your story not boring, is your antagonist. Very highly important. So I'm kind of touching on a lot of big things here really quickly. Again, ask follow-up questions if you have them, but I would say mainly study story structure. Make sure you're paying attention to your antagonist. When you're finished the story, finish the thing, even if you think it's not amazing. Finish it, because then you have something to work with. Just plow ahead and finish it. Let it sit for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Come back and read it yourself. Find the places that are lacking and fix those as best you can. Then, once you've done that, send it out to beta readers. You can either have friends that will do this for you, fellow authors. Make sure that they're familiar with your genre. Don't just give it to somebody who doesn't care for your genre. Or you can hire beta readers on Fiverr.com. Fiverr.com. I've done that, and that has been really beneficial for me because I've found some top-notch beta readers that really help me a lot there. And they don't charge a whole lot. Put it through a beta reader. Then put it through an editor. A developmental editor, not a copy editor. A developmental editor will tell you if the pacing is right and it's moving fast enough and the impact is good and all the other stuff. In other words, prepare to mold this story. Write it as best you can, then prepare to mold it, because things like whether it's boring, whether it's impactful, you can fix those once you have the skeleton of the story there. I hope that makes sense. Believe in your story and be prepared to work on it, to build it, to mold it, to adjust it until it no longer is these things that you're worried about. The cool thing about this fear is that it's completely within your control to deal with it. If you take these steps I've talked to you about, your story isn't going to be boring, and it is going to be impactful. This is completely in your control because this is your story, and you can make it what you want it to be by taking these various steps along the way. I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. Okay, we're going to move on to a question from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah says, my biggest writing scare right now is probably fear of rejection. Will all my hours spent writing be for naught? I'd like other people to enjoy and even buy my writing, but if they don't, then what? Okay, so this is the question that all of us come up against, right? This is that big question for writers. Fear of rejection. So it sounds like Sarah wants to have a traditional publishing contract. So I will say something similar to Sarah that I was saying to Robin, that the manuscript wouldn't be picked up by a small press. Just quick recap of that. Do everything you possibly can to make the book as good as you possibly can, and then polishing up your query and your synopsis and researching publishers, having a process where you send the story out to 5 publishers, see what you get, send it out to another 5, see what you get. Do everything you possibly can to get that publishing contract that you want. But then understand that this fear may come true. This is one fear that we don't have complete control over. Some of these we've talked about today, we do have control over, we don't have control over whether the book will eventually be accepted by a publisher. That's up to the publishers. It depends on what's going on in the market right now. It depends on how your story hits a certain publisher, a certain editor when you submit it. There's a lot of variables in there that we don't have control over. But if you do all of that and you spend a year or 2 trying to get this book published and it doesn't get picked up, understand that that's a possibility. And please, please, please don't let that stop your author path. Don't let that throw you off of being an author, because there is absolutely no reason in today's world that is so open to indie published authors to let somebody else's opinion stop you. Somebody else's opinion is valuable in as far as we want to become the best writers we can become. So we need that feedback. We need to get editors. We need coaches. We need to learn how to tell a really publishable story. But once you do all of that, I would say focus on that first. But once you do all of that, whether or not you get picked up is not entirely in your control. Like I said before, it's about 50% in your control. The question is, will all my hours spent writing be for naught? So I'm going to address a little bit of this question in the next one, because this whole fear that what I'm doing will be for naught came up a lot, and especially in my YouTube community question. I'm going to hit that here in a minute. But I would say to Sarah, just like I said to Robin, have in your hip pocket a plan B. And most of all, I would say once you start the process of submitting the book that you've completed to traditional publishers, understand that's going to take time. It's going to take you a year or longer to submit, get responses back, submit, get responses back, and try to get this traditional publishing contract. You don't want to sit on your hands while you're doing that. You want to move on to the next book. And trust me, you have another book in you. If you finish one book, you have another book in you. Even those of us who didn't think we did ended up having it, because there's something about writing a book that's kind of addictive and you want to write the next one. While you're submitting that first book, start working on your second book, okay? Not in a series, please. Not connected to the first book. A second different book, okay? Write a different story and then be ready with plan B for that second story. Okay, couple reasons this is a good thing to do. If story A gets picked up, you've got story B already. And so you can then potentially submit that to the same publisher and see if they'd be interested. If story A does not get picked up, and meanwhile you have written story B, you may be even more proud of story B, and probably you will be, because we typically get better as we go, like I've been saying. Story B, you can then start submitting, see if you have better luck with that. And that gives you another avenue to continue trying the traditional publishing path, if that's the way you want to go. You can finish story B. If story A doesn't get a contract, then you start working on seeing if you can get story B a contract. And meanwhile, you publish story A yourself. And everybody can absolutely do this. I know when you're a new writer and you've never even thought of publishing yourself, it's really scary. It was for me before I did it. But now that I've done it several times, I really like it. And I'm starting to prefer it even to traditional publishing. And that's a whole nother topic. We can talk about that if you're interested. Let me know in the comments. But when you give yourself options, your author career opens in front of you. If you slam the door, then you're shortchanging yourself. If you say, if I don't get a publishing contract for this book, then I'm done. Please, please, please don't do that. Okay. If you are a writer and you're working on writing this book, then you need to honor that part of yourself. And you need to say, I'm going to give myself every chance in the world to find readers, to find people who enjoy what I'm doing. So please finish book A, start submitting it. And while you're submitting it, work on book B so that you give yourself some options and stay open to indie publishing, because indie publishing is huge right now. It's exciting right now. You absolutely can do it with some help on the steps along the way. And you may be surprised at how rewarding it can be. All right. You may even think that somehow those people who aren't picked up by traditional publishers aren't as good or something. That is so not true today. Might have been true 50 years ago. I don't know. It is so not true today because self-publishing has really come up in the world as far as the quality goes. Indie publishers know we have to compete with traditional publishers. So we've gotten better at leveling up on our storytelling and our covers and our marketing and the whole thing. So don't feel like if a traditional publisher doesn't pick you up, that means you're not good enough, because traditional publishing, for one, is shrinking. It's a difficult market for traditional publishers. Many of them are not surviving. You've seen the bookstores closing in the past several, like over the last decade. And so things are challenging out there on the market. So publishers, traditional publishers, are limiting what they're going to accept. And the biggest question in their mind is it going to sell? Not is it good enough? Is it going to sell? So if you don't get picked up by a traditional publisher, don't feel that that is a mark on the quality of your book, especially if you've really put in the time and effort and gotten an editor and everything else, and you've made this a high quality book. Don't give up on that, because the indie publishing world is an exciting one, and you absolutely can produce quality books that way, and you can have a very exciting and rewarding author career that way. Okay, so that would be my hope for you. Don't let that fear hold you back. Finish that book and start the next one. Okay, last question. So this came from Imagine Pageant, was the username on YouTube. Thank you. That all the time I've spent on this book will amount to nothing. And that's a little bit about what Sarah was saying too. Okay, I'm going back to the poll that we did where I asked you on the YouTube community, what scares you most about the writing life? Never finishing the book I've started and wasting years on something that never works out. Those tied for first place in the poll. The third place was publishing and being judged not being good enough. Let me just address that one really quick. Publishing and being judged not good enough. There's a lot of things you can do about that. Number one is just spend the time, be patient, make your book as good as you can, get an editor, get beta readers, do the process you need to do to make this a quality book. And then once you know that it's a high quality book because you've gone through all these steps, then understand that when you publish it, there is going to be somebody out there that's going to say, oh, they didn't like this for whatever reason. That's going to happen. That's part of being an author. And that's part of the internet, honestly. People are going to have negative things to say sometimes. But if you put in the time and the effort and you take the right steps to make your book as good as you can make it, then that is not a fear you're going to have to worry about too much. I mean, every time I put a book out, I worry about that. It's natural to worry about that. What if readers don't like this? What if they think it's not any good? We all have that fear. If you take the time and the effort and you put in the work to make the book as good as you can make it, you're going to have people that are going to enjoy it as long as you're marketing it correctly and you're getting it out there. But there probably will be someone who won't. There probably will be someone who will judge it. We learn as authors as we go through this life and we put out a book and we put out another book and we put out another book. We learn to be less and less concerned with those few people who don't find the book good or who don't like it for whatever reason. Because we start to understand that we can't write for everybody. And there's always going to be somebody who didn't like the book for whatever reason. But for the most part, when we create really quality books and we put them out there and we make the most effort that we can for each one, most of the people are going to enjoy them. Most of the people are going to be kind in their responses. And it starts to be something that becomes less and less of an issue. So what we do is kind of try to learn to live with that fear, I guess is what I'm saying. And understand that as long as you've done your job, the book is going to be appreciated by most most people and probably not by some people. Okay. The other two in the poll that scored high, the one was never finishing the book I've started. I've addressed that one in this talk. I think we've hit that. If people have more questions about that, please ask those in the comments. Understand that my new book, Escape the Writer's Web, is all about helping you finish that book. The book and the workbook are all about that. So is my procrastination kit for writers. I'll put links to all of those below. If you're having any trouble finishing your book, I would recommend you check those out because that's why I wrote them, is to help you finish your book. So the last thing, this question of wasting years on something that never works out, the question that Imagine Pageant had here, that all the time I spent on this book will amount to nothing. This is such a big question and so hard to just quickly answer that I'm going to create a series of videos on this very question. I wrote this because I kept hearing this from writers when I would go to conferences. What if all this work is for nothing? And I worried about this too. And this comes down to one thing, and that is whether or not you would write no matter what. You have to ask yourself that question. Am I a writer or aren't I? And that's what I had to come to when I was facing this fear and this question. And that's why I wrote this book, is because for many, many years, I had one foot out the door in this relationship between me and writing. Am I a writer or aren't I? And for the longest time, I was waiting for validation from the outside world. I was waiting for signals like reviews, sales, awards, whatever, to tell me whether I should keep doing this or not. That's a total valid way to think about it. I mean, anything we do in life, typically we're looking for feedback to see if we should keep doing it. Is this something that's worth the time I'm spending? So that's a part of it. But I would say that somewhere along the line, we have to make a decision. Do I want to be a writer or don't I? And the best way we make that decision is we ask ourselves, would I write regardless of what happens in the outside world? Because so much of what happens in the outside world is outside of our control, right? I mean, we can do the best we can do, and there are many things we can do to increase the odds that we will be successful. But a lot of that is outside of our control. And the thing is that writing takes a lot of time initially. I've been doing this for, like I said, over 10 years, and I'm just now starting to build a backlist. I'm just now starting to get my feet underneath me as a writer and what I'm doing in my author career. So it takes time. And during that build-up time, where you're working on your skills and you're starting to build a platform and you're doing all the things that we authors need to be able to be successful in the outside world, you have to know inside yourself why you're doing this. Are you doing this because you want the books to make lots of money, or that you want fame, or that you want recognition? If that's the case, you need to think about that carefully, because there is no guarantee that your books are going to bring you money, or are going to bring you fame or recognition, or are going to do any of those things for you that maybe you're wanting your writing to do. I would ask you to realize that writing is a craft. You're devoting yourself to becoming better at a certain craft. Whether that turns into money or fame or recognition or some of the other things we're hoping for, you have to understand that a lot of that's outside of your control. And you have to understand that even if you do reach those goals, it's going to take you many years, most likely, to get there, and lots of building and lots of work and lots of effort. So you have to say to yourself, is this something I want to do anyway? Do I enjoy stories enough, writing stories enough, that I would do it anyway? And in my book, Your Writing Matters, I talk about things that writing gives back to you. Are you getting things back from writing that are motivating you to continue? For example, I talk about the many benefits of writing: writing to heal, writing to escape, writing to discover the truth, writing to release secrets, writing to boost brain power, writing to know your true self. When you have lived the writing life as long as I have, then you start to realize the many benefits that simply having a regular writing practice gives you. Not only as you develop your craft and you become more skilled, but what it gives you in terms of yourself as a person. I have grown as a person because writing is in my life. I have experienced amazing things in my life because of writing. So we have to have this reckoning with ourselves. And that's what I did at some point in my career. I said, okay, am I a writer or aren't I a writer? Because when we don't yet know for sure, and we're kind of got one foot out the door like I did, then every discouragement hits really hard. Every rejection, every poor sales, every bad review, which we all face, is going to hit you even harder if you haven't made this decision yet. Because then you're going to say, okay, well, this isn't for me and I should quit. And then you are going to feel like all the time you put into those stories was worth nothing. I'm not going to pass this off with some pat, oh, everything will be fine, because it won't be fine if you don't make this decision. If you feel like what you're doing will be for naught, if you don't make lots of money, or if you aren't recognized and become a famous author, then you need to think twice about what you're doing, because writing does take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of brain power and a lot of years. So if you don't love the writing for the writing, then you need to think carefully about what you're doing, because it could be you are wasting your time doing something that is not going to bring you what you really want. So you have to ask yourself, what do I really want? And I kind of equate this to dating. So maybe right now you're just dating writing, and you're just kind of seeing what it's going to be like, this relationship with writing, because it really is. It's a relationship. And so you're kind of dating. And the question is, are you looking for what this other partner is going to give to you? Or are you looking to deepen a relationship where you can give to that other partner? If you're thinking of getting into a relationship, oftentimes we think that a shallow relationship is one where we're just looking for what the other person is going to give to us. Imagine a woman may be looking for a sugar daddy. I see some of this happening sometimes online. They're just looking for a sugar daddy. They just want the guy who's going to give them the money that they want and the lifestyle they want. And if they give them that, then they will give them whatever they're needing in return. And then you will have that relationship, but that relationship's very conditional. Because if the partner all of a sudden loses the business and can no longer provide the lifestyle, then you'll be on to the next one who can. You have to think, am I treating writing like that? Am I asking writing to be my sugar daddy? Am I asking writing to give me the money and the lifestyle and the existence that I think I want, that's going to help fulfill me? And if it doesn't, I'm on to the next thing. If that's where you are, writing is not the choice for you. And I mean that honestly. I'm not saying, that's bad. That's just a situation where the writing is not going to give you what you're looking for. What is it you're looking for from your writing? That's what you have to figure out. And that's what my book can help you figure out. Is what you're looking for from writing something you can realistically expect to get? Things you can realistically expect to get back: the joy of completing a story, the escape of being lost in another world. I think I've told this story before, but I'm going to mention it really quickly here. I had a writer write to me one time from the hospital room, and her partner was in the hospital bed and didn't have very long to live. And you can imagine the difficulty of that position. This writer took that time to dive into their story, and just for a little while to escape the pain that they were in with this situation and go into the world that was their character's world and just enjoy that world for a while. Writing gave that person that escape. Writing can give you healing. My book, The Beached Ones, it is a supernatural thriller, but it deals with the subject of suicide. I had someone that I cared about very dearly commit suicide in my life decades before I wrote that book. That book is not about my personal experience, but because it did hit on the subject of suicide, it was healing for me. It helped heal that old trauma, even though the characters and everything were entirely different. The situation was entirely different. When I finished writing that story, I felt a new sense of peace. Writing can be healing. Writing can be a way to serve others. Writing can be all these other things I talked about in Your Writing Matters. Writing can be how you discover the truth about yourself or about the world, or what your values are. Writing can help you release secrets, maybe, that you wouldn't talk about, but you're happy to write a story about it. Writing can help you boost brain power. Writing can bring you more in touch with who you are inside. That's one of the things I love about it, because I feel like I've learned so much about myself and become so much more myself because I have devoted my life to writing. And I'm sure writing is going to have many more gifts for me along the way. If you can be happy with those things that writing really can give you, regardless of the outside world, then any writing you do will never be for naught, because you will find joy in the process of writing, and every piece of writing you do is going to gradually help you become a better writer. It's like every step you take along the journey of your life, writing is the same. Every page you write is building the writer that you're going to become. And that part is exciting. I think we get too tied up in, what is this writing going to do for me in the outside world? Is this story going to bring me money, recognition, fame, whatever? If we look at it a different way and we say, what is this writing giving me in the moment? It's giving me a way to escape. It's giving me a way to heal. It's giving me a way to find truth, whatever it is. And it's also helping me to build the writer that I'm becoming. In today's society, we tend to not put enough importance on who we are and who we're becoming. But at the end of the day, finding meaning in life is hugely important to human beings. If you've ever read Viktor Frankl's Search for Meaning, the very famous neurologist / psychiatrist who was trapped in the Nazi death camps in World War II for 3 years. He lost everything, and he came out of there and talked about how he saw in that experience how very important man's desire for meaning is. And if writing is one of your ways to find meaning in your life, then that is precious. And unfortunately, in our everyday lives, we don't put enough importance on that. We don't put enough emphasis on that. It's all about money, fame, and all these things, the trappings of the good life that we see on the outside, but we're putting not enough emphasis on who we're becoming, on how we're growing ourselves, so to speak. It's like our souls are these little plants, and we're watering them, and we're feeding them, and then we're nourishing them. And what are we growing up? And if writing is a way that you become more, that you become larger, which I think it so is, at least that's been my experience, then nothing is ever wasted on it. Because every time you sit down to write, you're contributing to yourself, to who you're going to be, to your increased skills, to your increased connection to your inner artist. How can that ever be wasted? I mean, that's huge. But unfortunately, we don't think like that oftentimes. So I would just ask yourself, if writing is something, the things that it can actually give back to you, are those enough for you? Are you willing to marry writing, so to speak? Or are you just dating it? And if it doesn't give you these outside things, you're out the door. Either way is okay. There may be something else in your life that will give you the meaning that perhaps you're looking for, or will give you these other things that you might be looking for. So I would say revisit your why for writing. Why are you writing in the first place? And let that be your guiding light along this career. Because all the outside things are going to be roller coasters, I can tell you from experience. You're going to be up and then you're going to be down. And the ups are delicious and the downs are horribly discouraging. So you're going to have those. But if you have that guiding light, that this is really what writing is for me, and that is something completely within writing's capacity to give you and within your control, then that is going to hold you through the whole thing. And when you come to the end of your life, I can promise you, because I can already feel it, that that is what's going to matter the most to you, right? I mean, how many books you sold when you're 90 years old on your deathbed, that's going to matter less to you than who you became because of those stories. So I hope that makes sense. I would encourage any of you who are struggling with this to get a copy of Your Writing Matters. And in fact, to that end, I am going to give away a copy of that now to the winner that I promised you. This winner has been randomly chosen, and that winner was, make sure I'm pronouncing this right, that winner was Kokoro Flow. So Kokoro Flow, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Leave a comment on this video and let me know, and I will send you a free ebook copy of Your Writing Matters. If you already have the book, then let me know and we'll work something else out. But otherwise, the prize is a free ebook copy of Your Writing Matters, and I would encourage anybody else who's facing that kind of big question to check out that book. Obviously, I want to sell books, but that's not why I'm recommending it. I'm recommending it because I think it is important for every writer to decide, am I a writer or not, regardless of what happens in the outside world, and that book is going to help you decide that. Okay, so I think that was the last question. As I said, I am going to do a series of videos on this whole question of what if it's all for naught, because I kind of hit on a few of the things that I think are important today, but there's a lot more to tackle in that question, so I am going to have some videos coming up for that. If you have any other questions related to that topic, be sure to add them in the comments, and I'll be sure to hit those in the upcoming videos. And if you liked this format, please let me know. I mean, this is something new I'm trying. It's a longer video, but I could potentially do these live in the future or continue to do them like these, just where I'm answering your questions. If you like this, please comment. Let me know, because I don't know otherwise, and I'm here to help you guys out. So if this was something that you enjoyed and you would like to have more, just me answering your questions, I'd be more than happy to do that. All right. In the meantime, we've hit some of your biggest fears, and I hope that helps you get back out there and get writing again. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.